Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. How quickly did you quit your last job and why? Part 5. Miami restaurant mastered the art of serving drinks at the outdoor bar. Right on the Intercoastal, the restaurant was situated on a causeway. Dolphins were playing not too far from our seawall. The chef is heading to the dumpster when he strolls by holding a bus pan of fish. In order to get the dolphins closer for the customer, the bartender, who is teaching me, asked if we could toss them the fish. After giving him the pan, the chef returns to cooking. The owner notices the bartender tossing fish and becomes extremely upset about wasting fish. He's saved by the bartender, a few servers, myself, and a few patrons. Everyone was saying that the chef had given it to the bartender and thrown it away. The chef is brought back by the owner, who stomps off to the kitchen. Everything was denied by the chef. The bartender was fired by the owner. I turned to leave too. I'm not going to work there. In any case, it closed down a few months later. Needed a job after the Navy in college. I was just searching for any place that needed money right away and was hiring. I submitted applications everywhere I could and accepted my first callback. Obtained a federal job eventually, but was able to wait out the hiring process. It turned out to be one of those BS jobs where you try to convince people who don't give a D to donate to a charity while standing on a corner. After 2 months, I lied about family matters because I was so over it and quit. The manager was a complete moron who had no financial sense. I don't like being around strangers, so I spent the entire day in the sun and got terrible acne for $10 per hour. That pay, once I've served in the military and earned a degree? Thank you, but no. The job was ridiculous and not worth it at all. After I got home, I logged back onto Indeed. This is the second error. Warehouse work involves auto parts, ostensibly working as a courier. The manager was a total P from the start. Worked, spoke, and dressed like a man. Literally wore men's underwear with boxer shorts poking out of her pants every day to the tune of about 3 inches. Utter lack of regard for others, treating her meagerly compensated staff like children. By now, you should be aware that I hold a bachelor's degree and am a veteran. Called each and every one of them Bud. I'm not your friend, lady, and I had to genuinely turn away from her several times in order to keep my hands off of her. Although I don't like to use violence, I really did fight people in the Navy for a lot less money. Merely demeaning and constantly complaining about how quickly employees left after working there. Why does it not occur to anyone on Earth? Effing 12-hour work days and $12 an hour. The schedule is for 6 days per week. Christmas Eve and the day after Christmas were open. Without telling me, tell me if you detest your life. Inane regulations such as prohibiting us from using our phones while not in class. The rule was not followed by anyone, and this becomes significant later. The day I received a new offer from the state parks, I pretty much quit after 2 miserable as effing months of looking for a new job. That job was whatever too, but I made better use of it. The day this really cool girl I liked working there got into it with this bee, I knew I was gonna leave. Background: the cool girl was a convicted felon who completed her sentence, sobered up, and regained custody of her child. Recognized that she had made poor decisions and was trying to turn her life around, and her child was the only motivator. Had him in prison, she had been arrested while pregnant, and she had taken that as a cue to pull herself together. Her, not mine words. To ensure her child had a good life and not repeat her mistakes, she thus moved mountains and valleys. To be fair, she had no excuse whatsoever and was well on her way. Having said that, she casually mentioned to me one day, just before the manager B started berating us for talking too much and not working hard enough while engaging in small talk, that she was her child's biggest fan and had a habit of dropping everything to help him when he needed it. I understood. He had her and not much else. The point is that she always responded, no matter what, when her child's school called to say he was sick or that she needed to come down because, as it turned out, the child had a medical emergency that needed her presence. She was managing to make it function. As luck would have it, her child's school calls one day in a true emergency and requests that she come down as soon as possible. I didn't get the specifics, but the short version is that this girl would only answer calls in the event of a real emergency, which it obviously was. The cool girl approaches the B of a manager and announces her departure to go take care of her child. 2 to 3 sentences that explain. With such audacity, that effing B replied, "Hey, I need to go take care of my kid. It's an emergency." Why do you use your phone while working? Examine, "Sincerely, lady, I'm leaving early to take care of this. Please excuse me while I go take care of my kid." Let's try that again. "You are not able to leave." Observe me. When the cool girl begins to make her way out, the idiot who worked there actually decides it would be a good idea to yell, "If you leave now, consider yourself fired." It was amazing, but I've never seen someone lose it like that. After flipping the bear switch, Mama turned around, grabbed the manager by the front of her ass, and yelled, "I'll effing end you, B, if you say something again for this BS job. Since I was incarcerated, my child needs me. Give me another go. I gave up." Releasing her, he bounded off, obviously not returning. It amazes me that someone who would have the audacity to tell a parent that they should have disregarded their 6-year-old child's need for $12 per hour. The only thing I regret is not leaving right away after she yelled at us and I was dropped off at the wrong address. Began freaking out right away before either of us had a chance to say anything else. The most impolite and discourteous person I've ever encountered. Less than 2 weeks later, I was gone. That place was an S-show, deserves to go under, and proved to me how the people working in the auto industry are just overwhelmed by S-mother effers with 2 brain cells between 10 people. I honestly don't know if I'll be able to control myself if I ever see that C again. Possessed no self-awareness or respect. In 1994, I was employed at a music store when I received a job offer from a company that produced sounds for synthesizers. While I lived in Berkeley, they were in Mountain View. Felt not all that distant. They conducted a few phone interviews with me before asking me to come in. It wasn't too bad of a drive when I drove over. When I walked in, they all gave me introductions. They led me into a room where 4 people were sitting in cubicles talking on phones. There was supposed to be a cubicle and an empty chair for me. Seemed like an odd place to record audio. I therefore assumed that they wanted my help with sound design. Nope, I was wanted for sales. I was devastated. I truly wanted to quit, but was content to work in sales instead. I did well in the interview. It had more cash. I gave a hesitant yes. They promised to have me start tomorrow. The traffic on my way home made me want to throw up. I actually prayed to God or whatever while I was driving. I called them when I got home and said I couldn't. They quickly went out of business. What was the most insane event that happened to you as a homeowner in an HOA? Part 5. My close relative is attempting to construct a house in a resort neighborhood. Very strict community, similar to an HOA. Alright, whatever, but he needs special attention. He needs a custom home because he's paralyzed and uses a wheelchair. Resort replied without issue. He received plans from the builder, and none of them were very good. For example, they may have compiled with some ADA requirements, but they never bothered to check to see if it's truly wheelchair user functional. It's not. They refuse a family member's request to bring their own architect. He's allowed to be his own architect because he reads the laws and CCRs, or whatever they're called. They consent. When the architect presents the plans, they reject everything. After reading up, he discovers it's okay. They grant permission but refuse other requests. They were so picky that we went back and forth with them for months. All because your home will appear somewhat different from the neighborhood if you use a wheelchair. For instance, larger doors that can accommodate a chair are examples of how things might differ and appear differently from the neighborhood. There's no proof to suggest they're not acting in an albeit manner. There's also no proof that they're anything more than holes. Had a development company that was based out of town. Would mail our dues, but they would never arrive, and about 6 months later, I would receive a return check. I requested an invoice in writing, but I never heard back. While this was going on, one neighbor made the decision to rally everyone and overthrow the HOA. They then demanded payment. My closing attorney required me to put about $2,500 in an escrow when I went to sell my house because it was unsettled. The person who bought my house used Facebook to find me after they received the same letter from the old HOA threatening legal action and placing a lien on my unowned property. To cut a long story short, the development company's owner was an alcoholic gambler who lost all the money, was sued by the new HOA, and lost. As a result of the fact that homeowners and board members were constantly trying to remove one another from their positions, I lived in an activist association that was constantly at each other's throats. There were letters that were delivered anonymously and notes that were slid under the door all the time. It was brought to my attention that I had a couple of bougainvillea vines that had grown, quite literally, 1 inch over the fence, and that I had failed to bring my deliveries in on time. This was due to the fact that I would occasionally leave for the weekend and bring them back on Sunday. It was a battleground for the Karen. However, the most unfortunate incident occurred when I was playing a board game on the floor of the living room. At the time, I was a bachelor, and this was a very long game. Consequently, my friend and I were playing it slowly over the course of a few days in order to get through it. I never left the curtains drawn because my condo was a corner unit that faced the parking lot, and I didn't want the entire place staring at me while I was relaxing in the living room. I always made sure to draw the curtains as tightly as possible. In addition, there was a sizable area of grass on both sides of the walkway that separated my apartment from the walkway. On a particular day, the most nosy neighbor who was on the board, she told everyone this as if it were a royal title, and whose name was literally Karen, inquired as to whether or not I had changed the carpets. The only way she could have seen that board game setup was if she had crossed the grass and pressed her face up to the window. The situation gave me the chills because it was the only way she could have seen it. To put it simply, I believe she was essentially saying, "I'm watching you." My wife and I purchased a home in a homeowners association back in May of 2020. We purchased the home from family, and we were informed that the HOA is, to put it mildly, very laid back. It's important to make sure that you pay your dues and submit the appropriate documentation whenever you make significant changes to the house or landscaping. When we purchased the house, we were given the rules and regulations, and they were very general. There was no mention of security cameras or motion lights anywhere in the document. Due to the fact that the house did not come with a doorbell, my father-in-law and I were finally able to install 2 security cameras and lights on Monday of this week. We had to run a few electric lines. On Tuesday afternoon, we were given a warning about making modifications to the house without first obtaining approval. For example, we'd already installed 4 motion sensor lights several months before the camera was installed. I assumed that all they wanted was a statement or something comparable to explain the rationale behind the implementation of the new system. It had been a couple of days since I'd sent the statement, and I've not received any response. When I finally received a response, it stated that the cameras needed to be taken down, paperwork needed to be submitted, and then they could be put back in place. Despite the fact that I've spent 6 hours installing the system and running wire, I'm not going to pull it down, and I will not make any changes until I receive a response to my submission. My guess is that they really don't have a leg to stand on in general, especially if it wasn't mentioned in the rules and regulations. In summary, we have 2 cameras and 4 motion sensor lights. A situation arose for one of my close friends. Did not belong to the homeowners association, but the rest of the neighborhood did, etc. He told me a few tales. It was a good thing that he had enough money to hire a lawyer and drag them into court. As a result, the rest of the neighborhood pretty much staged a coup and threw out their entire board of directors. Apparently, new board were much better neighbors than their predecessors because I've not heard any additional stories. Still, here are some of the highlights. She insisted that he tear down the detached garage that was already there when he purchased the house because the board had not given its approval for it. Insisted that he take down his recently installed privacy fence because it was a 1/4 inch higher than it should have been. There was an attempt to levy a fine against him for having Christmas lights that were a variety of colors, as well as for having a door that was the wrong shade of red, which was also the same color it was when he purchased the house. It was a full-on race car, which is not street legal, and it sat on the trailer outside the detached garage for probably 4 hours, which prompted a call to the county and the fine. The attempt to fine him for an abandoned vehicle was based on the fact that the vehicle did not have a valid license plate. Eventually, he was successful in obtaining restraining orders against the entire board, and he also had the sheriff come out and officially ban them from his property. After that, he filed a lawsuit against the HOA itself for harassment. When that happened, the rest of the neighborhood rose up in rebellion. These stories taught me not to ever purchase a property in a homeowners association. If you want to watch the part 4, click the link here. We're very, very glad to see you all in the comments. Many, many thanks for support.